Bitcoin is difficult by design. Bitcoin is fucking hard. That's the title of this one. Bitcoin is fucking hard. And I'm going to talk about a couple different things here in terms of what makes Bitcoin hard, why it's like that by design, and the green light theory. And I'm going to do it a little bit differently. It's something I've been talking about for months now. I think that as more and more people understand the green light theory, they understand how valuable sats are, whether it's 5 sats, 500 sats, 500 million sats. Each sat is extremely valuable. And the price of Bitcoin, as we call it, or the exchange rate between sats and dollars, is not even remotely relevant at this stage. It's not, because nobody understands what this asset is. And so you can't really put a value on something that's going to be the future reserve currency of the world, but nobody really understands that yet, or understands what it is and why that's going to play out. So whatever exchange rate you're getting for Bitcoin and dollars right now, it's a blessing. It's an absolute blessing. So let's start with the first one here. Bitcoin is hard. I think it's important to note that Bitcoin actually isn't that hard if you're trying to transact with it. It's extremely easy, actually. If you want to send somebody sats instantly, you can use the Lightning Network. All you need is a QR code or something that looks like an email address like this, jor@rizful.com. You type that into it, or you copy and paste it into there, and you can send somebody value. You can send somebody money, sats, to anywhere in the world as long as they have an internet connection and they have a Bitcoin Lightning wallet. It could not be easier. You either scan a QR code or you paste in an address. That's all you need to do. You don't need to check with your bank. You don't have to wait. You don't have to figure out transaction fee. You don't have to do the exchange rate. It couldn't be easier to send Bitcoin. Flip side of that, you want to receive Bitcoin, show somebody your QR code, give somebody your Lightning address. And this is why I say it's so important to have your own Lightning address at this stage, because these are all unique. Nobody else is going to be able to get jor@rizful.com. And so when people want to send you money in the future, that's what they're going to use. Just like if somebody wanted to send you an email today, you'd give them your email address. In the future, if they want to send you money or value, you're going to give them your Lightning address. So it's important. If you haven't done that yet, make sure you get yourself a Lightning wallet. You can use Rizful, you can use Wallet, Satoshi, Speed, Coinos. Get your own unique username because it could be gone soon. So in terms of sending and receiving, it's very easy to do. Even sending on chain. You know, if you have to set the transaction fee, there's a bit of a learning curve there, but overall, it's literally copying, pasting Bitcoin. And probably the first 20 transactions I sent in Bitcoin, I didn't even look at the transaction fee. I just sent it, which cost me a lot of sats. It was a very hard lesson to be learned, but it was still easy. You just copy and paste an address in there. You don't need anybody's last name, their mailing address, their phone number, their country. You don't have to check with their bank or your bank. There's no middleman there. It's very easy to do. It's very easy to use, but there are difficult components to it, which is why there's still 99% of the population who doesn't understand what this asset is yet. So the first one is just the journey to Bitcoin. I think discovering Bitcoin, it takes balls because you're going against societal norms. You're going against the system that's told you that Bitcoin is bad for 14, 15, 16, almost 17 years now. All you hear anywhere is how bad Bitcoin is, used by criminals, bad for the environment, Ponzi scheme, scam, magic internet money, all these things. That's all you hear all day. And when you tell somebody that you have Bitcoin, they almost look at you like you have 3 heads. You're like you're an alien. And I shared a video on the channel yesterday, and you wouldn't believe some of the comments that people left in there in terms of how they've been treated by their friends, their family, their network, just by talking about Bitcoin. So it's going to be a lot of years of looking like a dummy or a dipshit, but Bitcoiners are definitely going to have the last laugh. And I think that's part of being a Bitcoiner, is just knowing that 99% of your life, you're going to be called a dipshit. But that 1%, every so often, about 5 days a year, you look like a genius. And you have your friend and your family, everybody's calling you, how do I buy Bitcoin? It's not even it's not even 5 times a year. It's probably 5 times every 4 years. That's what it's been anyways. So you're going against societal norms. And in order to get here to Bitcoin, every single person has been through something. That could be a government freezing your bank account. That could be the government printing so much money that eggs that used to cost you $3 now cost you $20. It could be you getting laid off of your job because you didn't put a experimental needle into your arm. But every single Bitcoiner has got here because they went through something. They lost trust in the system. And it wasn't just because they saw a video or they watched something who says that they shouldn't trust the system anymore. They actually lived through something that made them trust the system much less than they did before. So nobody discovers Bitcoin when everything's great. Every single person who's understands Bitcoin, who's taken the time and the energy to go down this crazy rabbit hole, has been through something difficult. Nobody is immune from that at this stage of the game. Eventually, everybody's going to own Bitcoin. They might have like 50 sats, but everybody's going to own some Bitcoin. Everybody's going to be using Bitcoin. But at this stage, if you're here now, you have gone through something very difficult. Otherwise, you wouldn't need Bitcoin. So that's the first part, is just the journey. This is going against the societal norms is difficult. It's not easy. And then once you get there, you have nobody to talk to about it. You want to talk about it. You want to talk about it. You want to tell everybody about it, because what you found, it feels like hidden treasure. But then when you try to talk to people about it, they're just like, who cares? They either walk away, stop listening, or block you from their life, when all you want to do is help, which is even a worse feeling. It's not like any Bitcoiners are like telling their friends and family to buy Bitcoin so they can get richer. No. Everybody's telling their friends and family about Bitcoin because they want to save them. They see what's happening in the fiat system. They see how fucked that system is in every aspect of that system, and they want to try to help people. And what do they get back in return? Not just nothing, but very negative energy towards them. So it's tough. It's difficult, but it's by design, because if this was easy, if everybody could figure it out tomorrow, the opportunity would be gone. This thing would be worth $100 million tomorrow if everybody figured it out, and the opportunity would be gone. So instead of getting 850 sats for $1, you'd be getting less than 1 sat for $1. No, you'd be getting 1 sat for $1. If everybody knew what this thing was, if everybody was open to it, if everybody understood how fucked the system was, and they knew that Bitcoin was a solution, Bitcoin would be worth $100 million. And instead of getting 800 sats for $1, you get 1 sat for $1. So yeah, it's tough, but I'd say it's worth it. So that's the first part, is the societal norms, the rebellion. The next one here is difficulty adjustment. So if you want to get some Bitcoin, you have to do it one of two ways. The first way you can do it is you can mine Bitcoin. You can get something like this little guy here, a BitAxe, or an Apollo, or a whatever, an S9. I think they're like S21s now. But you can plug that thing in and you can use the energy in your physical world, and you can start mining Bitcoin. Essentially what you're doing when you're mining Bitcoin is you get computational power, and that computational power spits out a bunch of guesses. And those guesses, whoever matches the Bitcoin code, they get the block reward. So they get paid in Bitcoin. That's the incentives for people mining Bitcoin, is that if you provide energy to the network, if you help secure the network and grow the network, if you hit that block, if one of your guesses that your computation spitting out manages to match up with the block equation, then you win Bitcoin. Right now it's 3.125 Bitcoin, which is worth about $350,000. So that's one way you can do it. And anybody can do it. Anybody out there who has access to electricity, you can get a miner, you can plug it into the wall. You don't have to ask anybody's permission. You don't have to have X amount of Bitcoin or capital or funding or anything like that. You can just plug that thing into the wall and you can start earning Bitcoin. So that's one way to do it. The other way to do it is by actually providing value to the world. You provide value to the world, you get value in exchange for that, and you can convert that value into Bitcoin. Those are the only two ways that you can get Bitcoin. Nobody since day zero, January 3rd, 2009, nobody received Bitcoin by doing nothing. And if you look at other coins like Solana, XRP, every other cryptocurrency, essentially, they had insiders there. So when the coin launched, they gave some to their brother, whoever worked on the project. Their long lost cousin got a couple 100,000 coins. They do all that before they actually launch the coin. It's called a pre-mine, essentially. Bitcoin didn't have that. Bitcoin had a very fair launch from day one. So those are the only two ways that you could earn Bitcoin, is by mining or by providing value to the world and exchanging that value into Bitcoin. So it's difficult to obtain. And when you look at it in mining terms, I'm going to show you what the difficulty adjustment does and why it's important. So if you go to mempool.space, this is a really good resource for anybody who's trying to learn a little bit more about the Bitcoin network. But you can see this thing right here. It's called the difficulty adjustment. So every approximately 2 weeks, but again, nothing in Bitcoin is based on human time. It's all based on the block height. So the block height is essentially how many blocks there are that have been mined. So right now, the block height in Bitcoin is 917,515. That's the block height. That's essentially the time in Bitcoin right now. And so that means that since January 3rd, since the very first block was mined back in 2009, there's been 917,515 blocks. Each one of those blocks is just a bunch of transactions. And you can click into it and you can see all the different transactions that have happened that were put into that block. You can see where it came from. You can see where it went to. You can see how much Bitcoin they sent. You can see the fee that they paid. It's very transparent. But that's all the blocks are just a bunch of transactions. Me sending Bitcoin to you, you sending Bitcoin to somebody else. And those transactions get put into a block. And once that block has been mined, the new ledger of all the blocks with all the transactions, the new ledger of Bitcoin gets broadcast out to 25,000 different nodes around the world. That's the reachable nodes, 25,000 nodes. So when you're running a node, essentially what you're doing is you're just keeping a copy of all the transactions that have ever happened in Bitcoin. Since January 3rd, 2009, you have 900,017,515 blocks in there that you're keeping track of. Every transaction, if you're running a node, you have every transaction in Bitcoin's history. It's pretty cool. But the reason why these blocks are every 10 minutes is so that the network can stay in consensus. We just saw a block mined right there. So it's supposed to be every 10 minutes on average. This one was 19 minutes ago, 16 minutes ago, and then just now. So it's not exactly every 10 minutes, but it's the difficulty adjustment that keeps the network intact. It self-regulates itself using this difficulty adjustment. And what that means is that every time somebody plugs in a miner and they want to participate to try to earn some Bitcoin, one of the things I said there was that if you want to earn Bitcoin or get Bitcoin, you either have to mine it or buy it. So if you're trying out mining, you plug your miner into the wall. That means the total energy, the total power securing the Bitcoin network has gone up. You've added more computational power to the network, which means that it's harder for whoever else was there before. There's more competition now. So every 2016 blocks, or approximately every 2 weeks, that difficulty goes up or down based on the amount of people who are mining Bitcoin. So if the amount of people mining Bitcoin goes up, that means there's more people competing. There's more miners competing for the next block, which means the difficulty adjustment has to go up. Because we want to keep these blocks coming in every 10 minutes so the network can be in consensus. There's a miner that gets chosen to mine the block. They get to choose the transactions that get put inside that block. And there's only one miner that gets to do it. There's not 10 who get to decide and go back and forth. There's just one. And so that's what it does. And so the difficulty adjustment, then we can see right now we're behind a little bit, 22 blocks behind. So if that continued, we would actually have a downwards difficulty adjustment because people are unplugging their miners from the network, which means there's less competition, which means the network has to self-regulate itself and make it easier for those miners who are still mining to compete for that block within 10 minutes. That's the target, every 10 minutes. And so that's the difficulty adjustment within Bitcoin. That's what self-regulates everything here. And if you look at other blockchains, if we're going to compare again to like XRP and Solana, Doge, those networks, the blocks are coming in every 2 seconds. And so what would happen if one of those blocks was incorrect or there's something wrong that happened there? Could you imagine? And that's happened before. That's why the Solana network's gone down, because the blocks come in too fast. And if there's a problem with a block or there's an issue or an error, the network goes down because it's all out of whack. And the reason why Bitcoin's every 10 minutes is so everybody can get into consensus. And for 17 years, just about now, Bitcoin's only been down for, I think Bitcoin is 99.98% uptime. I think there was a couple of issues very early on in Bitcoin, but the network has remained active and running ever since then. So that's the difficulty aspect in terms of actually mining blocks. And so just kind of play this example out in your head. If somebody wanted to really mess with Bitcoin, what they could do is they could add a whole bunch of electricity to the network. They could plug in a bunch of miners to the network, which would speed up the blocks because there's more people mining now, which means the equation is going to be solved faster, which means the blocks are going to come in faster. So if somebody wanted to do that, they could essentially attack Bitcoin. And instead, because we know what the supply schedule is like, we know what it looks like for the next 100 years based on blocks coming in every 10 minutes. And so if somebody wanted to say, hey, I'm not going to put up with that, I'm going to say, we're going to have all this Bitcoin mined by 2040. They could just plug in a bunch of energy into the network, speed up these blocks, and the supply would be essentially issued by 2040. If the difficulty adjustment didn't work, if the block equation was the same difficulty into the future. But that's what the difficulty adjustment does. It regulates itself. So when there is a whole bunch of miners coming into the network, it cranks it up. So it makes it harder so that the blocks stay 10 minutes on average. And we can see here that the difficulty adjustment in Bitcoin has done a very effective job. If we look at the time chain calendar here, you can see that ever since January 3rd, 2009, the average block time between blocks has been 9 minutes and 36 seconds. So it's done its job. It's done its job. And on the flip side of that, if there's a whole bunch of people who stop mining for whatever reason, but the difficulty was the same, all of a sudden there's less people competing for that block, then what would happen? The blocks would take longer to come in because there's less people trying to find that block, trying to solve the block equation. And so it would take longer for the next block to be mined, which means that it might take 15 minutes or 20 minutes or 25 minutes. And that's a problem too. You don't want it to be, because then we'd be mining Bitcoin till the year 2200. So it goes both ways. You don't want the blocks coming in too quickly when there's more miners competing. And you don't want blocks coming in too slow when miners are unplugging. And so this difficulty adjustment is kind of the secret sauce in Bitcoin. It's what keeps this block time around 10 minutes on average. It's a little bit below, but again, that's kind of expected. You can see here the target's 10 minutes. So it will eventually, I think it'll actually just keep going down, 9 minutes 36 to 9 minutes 35, because as miners become more efficient, you can actually do more within those blocks. So that's why when we say the last Bitcoin will be mined in around the year 2136, 2140, because we don't know exactly. It's probably going to be a little bit quicker than we think, because as technology improves, as miners become more efficient, the cycles just keep getting a little bit shorter. The blocks keep coming in a little bit faster. So that's the difficulty adjustment. That is the secret sauce of Bitcoin. It's difficult by design because you don't want miners to be able to mine blocks very quickly to get the network out of consensus and the supply schedule to be changed, essentially. One of the biggest value props of Bitcoin is it's predictable. It's predictable. Compare that to fiat. Compare that to gold. Compare that to anything else. We don't know any other asset on earth exactly how many exist other than Bitcoin. So we know how many there are today. And because of the difficulty adjustment, we know how many there's going to be in 100 years from now. Pretty much to the month or the year, we can realistically predict how many Bitcoin will be in circulation at that point because of the difficulty adjustment. So it's harder as more and more people start plugging in, start running their own home miners. It's going to get more difficult. But that's by design, and that's why the difficulty adjustment will get cranked up. The blocks won't come in any faster just because there's more people mining. And that's the secret sauce of Bitcoin. So that's the difficulty in the mining department. And then the last part here that I want to try to explain to people is the difficulty increasing as more and more people understand Bitcoin. So this was the green light theory that I had that I've been talking about for quite a while now. The green light theory, let me bring this up. And I think most people here understand what it is, but I want to make it even simpler for you. I want to try to simplify it a little bit here. So this is my green light theory. So if we look at the amount of sats available, what was that number that we had? This one. I knew I could find it pretty easily. So this number here, this is the total sats that will ever be available. First time in history, in human history, that we've had an asset with a absolutely finite supply. That's a big deal. So this number here, this 2.1 quadrillion essentially, sats, or approximately 21 million Bitcoin, as most people know it. But I like talking about it in sats because it paints a clearer picture, because not everybody's going to get to 1 Bitcoin. In fact, a very, very, very small amount of the population will ever even come close to getting 1 Bitcoin. That's not the goal. The goal here is to accumulate as many of these sats, which again, you can buy 800, what was it? It's on this here. Today you can buy it for 828. So for $1 today, you can get 828 sats. Wild. So this is the total number of sats that will be available. And let's pick a number here. I want the chat to help me out with this one a little bit here. Let's try to figure out how many people understand Bitcoin. Not own Bitcoin, but how many people, total amount of people who understand Bitcoin. What do you think that number is in the world? Approximately. Well, we'll maybe take some feedback from the chat here, and we'll maybe use the average that we have that people put in the chat. What do you think the total amount of people who understand Bitcoin is? I'm going to take this off for 1 sec. I'm going to look at Nostr. Oh, Satoshi Boats is over there. Made it on Nostr today. Late due to Friday meeting of my own. No worries. Okay, so we have, Scotty says 499,000, so about 500,000 people. Solar says 5. I think that's a little bit low. I think if I had to guess, I would probably say probably closer to 1 million. I think a million would be on the high end. 250. Okay, Bad Gal B's with me. AV says 250. So let's just use 500,000. I think that's a pretty safe bet, honestly. So if we bring this back up and we look at 500,000 people. So what are these 500,000 people? Because again, we're not talking about people here who just own Bitcoin. Somebody has a Bitcoin wallet. We're not counting them. Why? Because when Bitcoin doubles or triples or quadruples, they don't really understand what they're holding. And so they're going to be a seller. They're not going to be a long-term holder of this asset. Because again, there's only this amount of Bitcoin that will ever exist. And so what we're trying to figure out with this green light theory is how many people are going to be holding on to these sats forever, essentially taking them off the market. And as the supply goes down, as the available supply of Bitcoin goes down, while demand continues to go up, that obviously brings the price way up. So that's kind of the green light theory here. So it doesn't matter who owns Bitcoin, how many people own Bitcoin. We can get that figure pretty easily. But the thing that really matters is the people who understand Bitcoin. That's what the green light theory is based on. So what this means, essentially, when you think about it this way, is that right now there's 500,000 people on this planet who are fighting for this amount of sats. And again, Even if somebody buys some, that doesn't mean that we're not including that in here, because they're probably going to either sell it when the price goes up, or when they get scared when the price crashes, they're probably going to sell it. So we're not really considering those sats to be locked up. That's what we're trying to calculate here, the amount of sats that are locked up. So if you had 500,000 people who will probably never sell more than 5% of their total stack, that's the main metric here that we need to figure out. We have two of those. We know this one's fixed. This one's kind of an estimate. Maybe we should know that. Maybe we should note that. This is known. Although no, it's not known, because these aren't sats that are available, but this is the upper limit. We'll call it that, the upper limit. Oh, Arnie's dreaming. Heard him barking. Upper limit. And then this is approximate. It could be higher, it could be lower. I don't think it matters too much. But the point of this is that this number will never go down. This number will never go up. And this number will never go down. Why? And this is why we're not including people in here who just simply own Bitcoin. This is all about the people who understand Bitcoin at a deep level and who are going to have conviction. They're going to keep 95% of their stack forever. And they're going to basically use their Bitcoin to change their family's direction forever. They're not going to sell that. They might use in the future to take a loan against or whatever they need to do, but they're not going to sell. Maybe I'll put that in here. HODLing at least 95% of their stack. So this number is the maximum, the upper limit, and this is kind of the lower limit, right? Because the theory here is that once people understand Bitcoin, they never go back. They never go back to fiat. In history, in the 17 years of Bitcoin history, there might have been, I don't know, what would you guess? A maximum of like 50 people who went fully down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. And then they decided, you know what? This asset isn't really for me. I'm going to sell my Bitcoin. I'm going to go back into the fiat world because it makes more sense in the fiat world where I'm a slave. The government essentially steals my life. They print more money. They require zero energy to create money. That system makes more sense. I would say the upper limit of people who have done that have been like 50. So here's the thing. Here's what we need to keep in mind here, that every single day, all around the world, this number here, this 500,000 is going up. It's never going down. It's never going down. So in a week from now, we might have 500,002 people who understand Bitcoin. And then in a month from now, we might have 500,008 people who understand Bitcoin. And then maybe next year around this time, we'll have 500,555 people who understand Bitcoin. Shout out to Sharon B for the 555. But this number is never going to go down. It's only going to go up. And this number is never going to go up. It's only going to go down. As people lose sats, as people lock themselves out of their Bitcoin wallets, as people lose their phones that they didn't have their Lightning wallets backed up, this number is only going to go down. This number is only going to go up. So what does that mean? It means that there's forever going to be more people competing for a fixed supply of sats. That's the green light theory, is that when your green light turns on, once you understand Bitcoin, once your conviction's there, that light never shuts off. And all around the world, there's more and more green lights turning on. And as that number goes up, that means there's going to be more and more people competing for the same fixed supply. So what does that mean? Just think about that. When there's more and more people fighting over a scarce supply, what happens? The price will go up. If you had a town and you had this apple tree, and the apple tree produced 10 apples a day, and they were the best apples in the world, the best apples in the world. It extended your life by 10 years. They were delicious. Everything about them. They were very good apples. And this apple tree in town produced 10 a day. And for the first 2 weeks, as people were learning about it, about these apples, about how special they are, there was 5 customers there. And then those 5 customers turned into 10. And then those 10 customers turned into 20. So it's the same thing. You have a fixed supply, 10 apples per day. And as that number of people who want those apples goes up, they're going to be willing to pay more. They're going to have to pay more of a price. When there was 5 people there, they might have been able to pay $1 for an apple because there was 5 apples left over. There wasn't a big supply crunch. But as it went to 10, maybe the price went up to $2. But then all of a sudden, 20 people wanted those 10 apples, and there's a bidding war there. This person is going to pay $5 for it now. And then all of a sudden, there's 100 people in the town who want those 10 apples, and they're lined up for blocks. And then 1,000. And what do you think happens to the price when you have a growing number of people, growing number of demand with the same fixed amount of apples? The price goes up because there's more people competing for the same scarce fixed supply. So that's the green light theory with this. And that's similar to the Bitcoin mining schedule. Whereas there's more and more miners coming onto the network, it becomes more and more difficult to mine. So that's the whole theme here, is that Bitcoin is very difficult by design. And as this number goes up, as more and more people understand Bitcoin, it becomes harder and harder to get a significant amount of this stack. Like back in 2012, there might have been 50 people who understood Bitcoin. And so at that time, there's only 50 people that you were competing against. So getting a significant amount of these sats was easy because nobody cared. Maybe 50 people understood Bitcoin. So it was very easy. There's very low demand, or people who understood Bitcoin, and there's very high supply, this number here. And so it was very cheap. The price was very low. The exchange rate was very low. And that's why people who were here in 2012, they managed to get a large chunk of these sats. And many of them are selling them now because they've increased by 10,000 times. So does that make sense when I stated that way, in sense of this is the lowest number because of how Bitcoin works, because nobody ever goes down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and leaves? This number will only go up. The number of people who understand Bitcoin, the number of people who are competing for Bitcoin, this number is only going to go up, and this number is only going to go down. So we're going to call that the upper limit and the lower limit. And so that's like the perfect storm. And again, we haven't really seen the point where there's 10 apples being made in town, or the apple tree is producing 10 apples, and there's 10 people who want those apples yet. Actually, we kind of are, because Sailors essentially bought the next 2 years worth of Bitcoin supply. So we're kind of there right now. We're at the very early stages of the scarcity here, the supply crunch that's coming. But at some point, we are going to see absolute scarcity at work for the first time in human history. For the first time in human history. And why hasn't that happened yet? Because there's still like 2 million Bitcoin apparently on exchanges. So as that number goes down and down, and this number goes up and up, it's only going to move one direction. So that's the difficulty here. Bitcoin is very difficult by design. So you have the human element to it. Basically, you have to have enough balls, enough courage to. You ever see that meme where there's like a whole crowd of people and they're all yelling like, "You're wrong, you're an idiot, you're stupid." And then there's one person standing against the crowd and saying, I think in the meme, he's holding a Bitcoin balloon. But it's the same kind of thing. In your normal life, everybody's calling you a dummy. Everybody's calling you a dipshit, that you've gone mentally ill, insane. So it's hard. It's hard to overcome that. It's hard to go against the grain like that. And I have a lot of respect for people who have, which is Bitcoiners. So it's the societal norms, difficult to go against. The fiat cult is difficult to escape. And then you have the mining that gets more and more difficult as more and more miners come onto the network. And then we have the green light theory, which means that as more and more people understand what Bitcoin is, there's more and more people competing for that same fixed supply of sats. So it's going to get harder and harder to earn sats. That's why we see the exchange rate there. That's why you see the exchange rate that keeps going down and down and down. It's the exact same thing. So it looks like we just hit a block here. But this number, if we zoom out here, so 824, if we zoom back to block, I don't know, half the time ago. So this was back in 8 years ago. This is 2017. March 2017, for $1, you could have purchased 98,000 satoshis, 98,450 satoshis. Because again, if you look at the green light theory here, at this time, that number of people who understood Bitcoin, that number of people who were competing for these sats was much lower. So you could get a lot more sats because there was less people competing for the sats. So in 2017, you could have got 98,450 sats for $1. And today, you get 824. 825. Looks like the price is kind of ripping this morning. So there it is. Bitcoin is difficult by design. It has to be. Money has to be hard for society to work. And there's a quote from Tiger Woods who said, let me bring this up here. He had a quote, one of my favorite guys ever, Tiger Woods. He had a quote that said, train hard, fight easy. Which means the harder you trained, the easier the fight was. But if you look at it through a Bitcoin lens, money hard, life easy. When the money's hard, life is easy. We never had hard money before, not in our lifetime. And on the flip side of that, when money is easy, life is hard, which is exactly what we lived through from 1971 when they took the US off the gold standard to today, essentially, where most people are still living in that fiat cult. So in this world, the money is easy and life is hard. Because when you give the ability for other human beings to print money, every time they print $1, they devalue yours, which makes your life harder. When you take away that ability for other humans to create money, the money becomes hard and your life becomes easier because you don't have people stealing from you every second of every day. So things don't cost as much. You don't have to work as hard as you would in this world. So money is hard, life is easy. When money's easy, life is hard. And it's just like this. On the flip side, it would be train easy. If you don't train, then the fight's going to be hard. Like these aren't, I know it's so different. It's a complete paradigm shift. It's a whole new world that we're moving into here. And that's kind of why it takes so long for people to figure out what's happening here, is because we are coming from a world where the money is easy and life is hard. And we're moving into a world now where money's hard and life becomes much easier. If you notice, if you're a Bitcoiner over these last couple of years, your life has got significantly easier because you're storing a hard money. What used to cost me 100,000 sats now costs me 20,000 sats. So when you store your money in Bitcoin, everything becomes cheaper. When you store your money in fiat, everything gets more expensive. Because one of the first one there, Bitcoin, nobody can create more of it. It's hard money. The second one, fiat dollar, human beings can create that with no energy required. And so things get more expensive because every single dollar that they create, your wealth, your time, your energy is worth less every second of every single day. So Bitcoin is difficult by design.